The 2025 F1 grid is creeping closer to completion, but we still don't know how it's going to look for the remainder of 2024. If you've been following our videos through F1's prolonged silly season, you'll know it's had more twists and turns than the first sector of the Circuit of the Americas, and there's somehow still more to come. We have firm answers we can give you about some of the unresolved issues in the driver market, even beyond concrete news like Alpine promoting Jack Doohan to partner Pierre Gasly. But it's also become clear that Williams and the two Red Bull teams might have driver changes before the end of the year, which means there's life in this mad driver market yet. Williams is evaluating which drivers may be available to replace Logan Sargeant for the remainder of 2024, as a mid-season change there looks likelier now than ever. It's a shame given Sargeant was on his best run of form just a few races ago, qualifying decently compared to Alex Albon, even though his race results were still worse. But Sargeant went into the summer break off the back of an awful Belgian Grand Prix weekend, and a huge crash in final practice for the Dutch Grand Prix was the worst way to return to action. Sargeant caused extensive damage on the first weekend for a major upgrade Williams pushed through for both cars, forcing him to miss qualifying. It wasn't a good look for one of only 3 full-time drivers yet to score a point this season. Sargeant's being replaced by Carlos Sainz at Williams for 2025 anyway, but a tight Constructors' Championship battle in the midfield may necessitate a change before then. Sargeant's flashes of potential have failed to translate into consistent performances, and the needless Zandvoort accident, which was caused by carelessly running onto the grass in wet conditions, was just the latest in a string of costly accidents. Williams boss James Vowles has left the door open to replacing Sargeant during 2024 for months. He has never guaranteed Sargeant's place is secure and instead stated he must earn it, which, with this latest crash and continued underperformance, is now seriously in doubt. After Sargeant's crash, Vowles kept a notably low profile in the F1 paddock over the rest of the Zandvoort weekend, which is unusual for someone who doesn't have a reputation for dodging the media. But he is known to have spoken with Mercedes boss Toto Wolff about reserve driver Mick Schumacher's potential availability and considered who else might be available. Outside of the team, doubts about Sargeant's seat have grown bigger than at any point this season, and it may be that the Zandvoort shunt was the final straw internally too. Sargeant's offering nothing in terms of performance or points, yet has added to an already eye-watering repair bill for Williams in 2024, and yet again made life harder for his side of the garage and those at the factory. Replacing Sargeant depends on Williams having a cast iron upgrade to throw in for a maximum of 9 races, if this is pushed through in time for this week's Italian Grand Prix. Monza's a much better place to make the change than the following races in Singapore and Azerbaijan. Nyck de Vries proved that with his surprise points finish on a shock mid-weekend substitute appearance 2 years ago, ironically for Williams. Zandvoort and Monza also helped bed Liam Lawson in last year as the injured Daniel Ricciardo's replacement, setting Lawson up for a points finish of his own in Singapore. And Lawson would be the ideal stand-in for Williams now, but that's not clear-cut by any means, partly because of Red Bull's own uncertain situation. Red Bull may need Lawson itself before the end of the year. A driver shake-up with either Sergio Perez or Daniel Ricciardo being replaced in season cannot be ruled out, and in either case, Lawson would find himself on the 2024 grid in one of the Red Bull teams. Perez was better at Zandvoort than before the summer break, and 6th was his best result since May's Miami Grand Prix, but he still trailed Max Verstappen by a big margin, even though he had a faster floor specification the team reckoned to be worth 0.2 of a second. Meanwhile, Ricciardo had another topsy-turvy weekend in which he was knocked out of Q1 in qualifying but then had a better Grand Prix. Red Bull's a bit lost with its drivers at the moment, and from what we were told at Zandvoort, neither Red Bull team is 100% sure what its driver lineup will be after September. There's an unusual gap in the schedule in autumn, and Red Bull will use that to re-evaluate its driver situation for both teams. Handing Lawson over to another team for the remainder of 2024 before that review happens would be careless. Red Bull team principal Christian Horner suggested there was a chance Williams could take Lawson if it needed him, but he was very clear it would depend on the exact terms, namely that Red Bull could have Lawson back quite quickly if it needed him. Letting Red Bull have the ability to recall Lawson would surely be a problem for Williams, but wait, there's more. Giving Lawson to Williams could well hurt Red Bull's other team. RB is pushing for 6th in the championship, and giving a rival midfield team a strong driver could be self-defeating. Even though Williams is unlikely to overhaul RB in the standings, Lawson could easily take points away from the Red Bull team in the upgraded Williams, which showed impressive speed in Alex Albon's hands at Zandvoort. The reason why Williams would benefit from having Lawson is exactly why it may not be in Red Bull's interest to let him go there. Lawson's tricky availability seems to be why Mick Schumacher is suddenly in the picture at Williams. Mercedes reserve driver would certainly be easier to get, and while he has been out of F1 for a year and a half, he does have 2 seasons of experience driving for Haas to call on, and he did score points in that time. Schumacher has been racing in the World Endurance Championship for Alpine alongside his F1 reserve opportunities, but in addition to simulator work, he has also kept sharp on track, driving for various F1 teams in old car tests, tyre tests, and for Mercedes to help benchmark Antonelli's private tests. Schumacher is not exactly the dependable, safe pair of hands that Williams needs. There's a reason he's not been regarded by other teams as a viable full-time candidate since losing his Haas seat, including by Williams, which could have replaced Sargeant with Schumacher after last season if it wanted to. Sargeant and Schumacher don't have vastly different F1 career profiles. It's a gamble to replace a driver who isn't quick enough and crashes every now and then with a driver whose 2-year F1 career ended because he was not quite quick enough and crashed every now and then. And given Schumacher is still considered by some to be an outsider for the vacant Audi-owned Sauber seat in 2025, a 9-race audition might amplify the pressure and potentially encourage mistakes that Williams can ill afford. The only alternatives would be to bank on a total rookie. Again though, it looks like relatively slim pickings. The don't help a championship rival rationale would presumably preclude Alpine loaning out its new 2025 driver Jack Doohan, who might otherwise be the most appealing option. Aston Martin reserve Felipe Drugovich has been linked and is highly regarded there after his running in 2022 machinery, but he has also spent 2 seasons on the sidelines and has no F1 race experience. Williams has its own alternative in-house rookie too, in Formula 2 race winner Franco Colapinto. As a member of the Young Driver Academy who impressed in an FP1 outing at Silverstone, it could appeal to Williams to replace Sargeant while backing another of its own talents. But Colapinto's inexperience and a question mark over his ultimate potential would make him a risk too. All of that's basically to say that Sargeant might just be left alone, not because he's worth keeping, but purely on the basis there isn't a clear-cut alternative. One driver we didn't mention there is Kimi Antonelli, who is a hugely talented young driver and someone Mercedes would have no selfish competitive reason to block from a Williams loan. He's the least refined of all, given he's in his rookie F2 season, hasn't driven in free practice yet, and has just turned 18. But the main reason we left him out is that Wolff has emphatically ruled Antonelli out of going there. Antonelli will make his official Mercedes debut in FP1 at Monza this weekend, but as far as gaining race experience at Williams this season goes, Wolff said that's not going to happen. Mercedes wants his development programme to continue as planned, encompassing a full season competing in F2 as well as private F1 testing commitments at Mercedes, because Antonelli's set to make his full-time F1 debut with Mercedes next year. Wolff has recently conceded that Max Verstappen will remain a Red Bull driver in 2025, which all but guarantees Antonelli will be made George Russell's teammate instead. Since it emerged Lewis Hamilton would leave Mercedes for Ferrari next season, Wolff has been mulling his options. He had grand designs of luring Verstappen away from Red Bull as a series of problems engulfed the world champion team, and Verstappen's father Jos thought it was in Max's best interest to move. Wolff continued his courting of the Verstappens for several months and thought there was still a possibility until the summer break, during which he held talks with Verstappen's management. But he's now conceded that Verstappen will stay at Red Bull after all, as Mercedes and the Verstappen party have accepted there is no deal to be done for 2025, so Wolff will not wait any longer on him. As Ferrari driver Carlos Sainz, another Mercedes backup, has committed to joining Williams in 2025, that leaves Antonelli standing alone, and he's also become a more legitimate choice in his own right. Antonelli's rookie F2 season has gained momentum, despite his Prema team struggling to adapt to a new car, and the Italian is 7th in the standings with a feature race victory and a sprint win to his name. More importantly to Mercedes though is how he has impressed in an extensive private testing schedule. That 2022 car programme has taken Antonelli to the Red Bull Ring, Imola, Silverstone and most recently Spa, and spanned more than 10 days. Mercedes has become increasingly convinced that Antonelli has the ability and the temperament to step into F1 immediately. That's even considered the case if Mercedes continues its impressive current trajectory and is fighting for regular wins in 2025. This way, Mercedes will be able to guide Antonelli closely by having him in its own F1 team, rather than entrust his development to someone else by loaning him out. There's another vacancy on the 2025 grid that's ended up a real afterthought in the driver market, at least as far as the drivers are concerned. What should have been a massively sought after seat at what's going to be the Audi Works team has ended up being one that nobody really wants. Sauber, the team Audi's buying, is so terrible at the moment that not many drivers seem to care about its potentially bright future. The present is simply too off-putting. But one driver who feels differently is Valtteri Bottas, probably because it's now Audi or bust for the fourth most successful current F1 driver. Bottas has never been first choice for anyone during this long-winded silly season. Haas signed Esteban Ocon, Williams got Carlos Sainz, and Alpine's promoting Doohan. Even staying with Sauber, which Audi is still in the process of taking over 100% ownership of, looked like a long shot for Bottas not that long ago. But a major change in July, with project leaders Andreas Seidel and Oliver Hoffmann getting the axe, and ex-Ferrari team boss Mattia Binotto coming in to take charge at Sauber instead, has reset the board. Bottas had talks with Binotto after the Belgian Grand Prix a month ago, and ahead of Zandvoort too. Bottas talked of mutual respect from both sides, which didn't feel like it was there with the previous management. The upshot is Bottas reckons he has probably bigger chances now of re-signing with Sauber, partly because other options for the team have gone elsewhere, partly because other options for him have disappeared, and partly because of the management change. Bottas no longer feels like he's being kept in the dark about the team's plans, and he now again sounds genuinely enthusiastic about staying, which he should, unless Binotto and Audi want to go in a different direction, but that would mean going very left field. There are no convincing experienced alternatives to Bottas on the market. That might change if Red Bull drops Perez, but a driver who will turn 35 next season, fresh from the axe, might not represent much of an upside, even if he would be expected to improve on his current form. Otherwise, Audi is picking from scraps. Bottas has battered current teammate Zhou Guanyu this year. Kevin Magnussen has been dropped by Haas, likewise Sargeant at Williams. Schumacher remains a contender, and Binotto knows him of old given his past Ferrari links, but we've already explained why he's not an exciting pick for anyone. Maybe there's a wild card in the pack, like Williams is looking for as a possible Sargeant alternative for the rest of 2024. Interestingly, ex-F2 driver Robert Schwartzman drove for Sauber in Friday practice at Zandvoort, a chance that surprised him as much as anybody else. Binotto knows him very well and is believed to think highly of his work as a simulator driver at Ferrari. It's more likely this was a chance to get a taste of the car in reality, then perform a development role for Sauber as he did for Binotto at Ferrari, rather than some kind of race seat audition. But we probably can't take anything for granted given how this silly season's going.